For a closer look at the future of the U.S. Postal Service, our Phillip Yin spoke with Daniel Soifer, Executive Director at the Consumer Postal Council.
Well, we care an awful lot about how the consumers of the government's monopoly for postal service are treated. And we've had that issue for years. And the question is now, in this environment of declining mail volume, people are just using less mail all over the world. What happens to those of us that have to count on the government to deliver a mail and buy a stamp?
I took an informal poll before this interview and asked around the office, and not one person has been to a post office in the last month.
Really?
Except for me, of course.
Huh?
I just want to answer the steep decline in users that are using the post office. How big of an impact is this? Is this ultimately going to kill post offices?
Yeah, what we're seeing now is that worldwide, the business model for the delivery of mail is badly broken, and it's not going to get any better.
And how are you going to fix it?
Well, different posts are doing different things, and some of them are working and some of them are not.
You did a study in Europe, Asia. You looked at post offices around the world.
We did.
Who's doing it right?
Well, different people are doing certain things very well. In some cases, you have Canada, who's having a lot of luck locating post offices in stores and convenient places for consumers, and that's working really well. People like that.
One of our guest producers is from Portugal, and she tells me that banks and post offices are together in the country of Portugal. Does that model work to combine this public post office with private companies? Does that combination ensure that the future of post offices can survive?
Financial services are one way that national posts are looking to find new ways to get revenue from the networks that they have. And when it's done well, it does work fairly well, but there's a lot you have to get right.
The U.S. Post Office here is certainly not an example of what to do. I mean, I think they lose between around $10 billion a year. You can add or minus a couple billion. Is it safe? I mean, some people say, look, because of the unions, because of the structure, because of the government, because of all these employees, it's very, very difficult to change because they don't want to change. Do you think that's true?
Politically, it's just a very difficult thing to get through Congress. Congress hasn't done a good job addressing the Postal Service since 1971.
What does the Post Office of the future look? I mean, your report, I mean, you did a lot of studies. What comes out to be a big surprise for you, and how does that help us think about the Post Office of the future?
Three major strategies. One is find new sources of revenue. Two is liberalize the government monopolies and find new ways to adjust the requirements on the Postal Service. And ultimately, a combination of different strategies are what we all need to do to just fundamentally rethink the role of the post office and how postal services are provided.
But is your comments and your voice and your reports, are they listening to that? I mean, is that forcing them to think differently about the role of the post office?
Congress is as much a part of the problem as anybody, and they have to be willing to step out and let the Postal Service address its own needs. There have been some pretty reasonable ideas coming out of the Postal Service, but Congress hasn't been willing to let them do it.
All right, this might be controversial, but do we need the post office anymore? I mean, if I'm sending you a letter, I can send you an email. If I'm sending you a package, I can go to any other private organization out there who would be happy to take my money to do it. Why do I even need the post office anymore?
Well, there are a lot of Americans, poorer and older Americans especially, who don't have internet access. And Americans tell pollster after pollster again and again that they like having the Postal Service and they like having it be run by the government.
But do they want to pay for it?
Well, that's the question. The old model is to have people who buy stamps pay for the Postal Service entirely. And I think we're into an area now that if Americans and people worldwide want to have the universal postal service as they know it, they're going to have to find another way to pay for it, and it might be the taxpayers are the ones that are going to have to do it.
When you look at the Postal Service around the world, I mean, was there one country that stuck out to you that was just a big surprise for you when you did your research?
New Zealand and generally the EU are doing a lot of things with liberalization that I think are working much better than people had thought that they would.
Anything in Asia, China in particular, I mean, that's going through tremendous change as you have this sort of state-owned post office system competing against private companies as well, and their online shopping has taken off, and I'm wondering how much of that is going to be based on this sort of shopping of the future. How big of a role does the post office play?
Well, in China, first of all, the government plays a big role in subsidizing that universal postal service, and that's different than in Western Europe and in the United States. If that stays to be the case, I think that a combination of liberalization strategies and finding ways to adjust the monopoly in ways that they can find different ways to give people the service that they need, there are some strategies that have worked well in other places that would really benefit China.